The premise is that everyone has mediumship capabilities, to put it short. Everyone, a lot of people don't believe they can, or they've got to hunt down some kind of a medium to tell them exactly what they want to hear or to resolve a problem. And what this book is saying, sure, you can do that. However, know that everyone was created so we all have access to this form of communication, and the forms are endless. And it goes into all kinds of odd ways of recognizing that you might actually be having communication with people on the other side, so to speak, but don't know it or don't realize it. And so this is invoking hidden, what I call spiritual senses. We have our physical senses. We also have associative spiritual senses.
Welcome to Soul Explorers with your hosts, Gary Langley and Sally Taylor. Welcome to Soul Explorers. We're your hosts, Sally Taylor. My name is Gary Langley, and today we have August Goforth with us. August is a medium, a mystic, an author, and a licensed psychotherapist. August, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, thank you. We're pleased that you're here too. And I should say ahead of time, I think I can speak for Gary as well, that we've had a lot of interaction with you over the last couple of years, and I feel like you are a dear friend at this point in time. So I'm very, very happy to have you come on and talk about some of the material that has come to you essentially from more subtle realms and has resulted in several books. Would you like to give us the titles of those, and then maybe we can go into what they're about?
Collectively, they're called the Risen books because that's so it's about language, and I'm all about language. And so when we talk about people who have transitioned or non-embodied or in the summerland or whatever, the term I use or have been led to use is the Risen. And so they're called the Risen books. And the first one that came out was The Risen Dialogues of Love, Grief and Survival Beyond Death. The next book was The Risen, A Companion to Grief. And then there were a couple others kind of extracted from them. There's another book that's sort of a concentrated form of The Risen Companion to Grief, because they're big books, having worked with them, and they're very deep, and there's just a lot that goes on. And so there's one that extracted a lot of the material to make it a little simpler for people, especially when people who are in grief, any kind of grief, oftentimes you're not firing on all cylinders or you're too tired to read. And so I asked the Risen contributors to these books to make a slightly shorter version, which I like it a lot. There's a couple other books off the top of my head. One is about dreams. It's called Tangible Dreaming, which is really a different topic.
When you talk about the Risen contributors, maybe we should explain that a little bit. How this book came to you, how you received the information that became each book.
Yeah, you read my mind. So it actually states that at the back of the book about the authorship, and so it mentions me as one of the authors, and my companion of many years ago who had transitioned named Tim Gray, and he's one of the authors. And we were the focal point of a kind of an experiment from a group that we call the Risen Collective. And so I'll just read what it says because it puts it in words better than I can remember to say. It says, the Risen Collective, the primary energy behind the orchestration of the Risen books, is comprised of inestimable numbers of non-terrestrial beings, plus equally invaluable terrestrial divas of various ranges of intelligence, status, self-awareness, and time spans. All are companions in a cooperative of higher vibrating multidisciplinary groups residing in spiritual geographies outside the normal range of terrestrial psychic access. This collective includes educators, scientists, healers, philosophers, writers, and artists from multicultural and multitemporal backgrounds of Earth and other dimensional systems, and who share an intensely committed interest in the advancement of communicative relationships with those still embodied on Earth and in other dimensional systems. They are contributing this service under the auspices of an even vaster vibrational gathering, the Risen Assembly. So it kind of it's like coming down, and it was gathering in that way. And they wanted to see, they wanted to explore the relationship I had with Tim after Tim had transitioned, which activated a lot of my unused mediumship capabilities or latent capabilities that had kind of gone into hiding since I was a child. And that's a whole nother story. And when Tim one day had actually manifested physically for a few brief seconds in the privacy of my room. And from there, we we were exploring together all of this, and it attracted the attention of all of these other risen entities and scientists and educators, that they were just very fascinated by how this seemed to be a spontaneous thing, like I hadn't wasn't sitting for direct physical mediumship, nor was Tim, and but somehow our love for one another created this communication. And so they wanted to explore that, and also to see what would come of it. And what came of it was this book, which took about 9 years altogether to manifest, because it involved transmitting information through these thousands of different people and nature spirits, and for me to translate it. And fortunately, things lined up because Tim was a very brilliant writer and editor here in New York City. And I am a really, really good writer, and we both have very good command of the English language. The English language is the most malleable language on the planet, is that it changes from day to day, and it can adopt and stretch and translate new things. And it's just a brilliant something or other. And so English was the language that they wanted us to use. And the book just grew out of that. And it was basically also what you would call my mediumship abilities or capabilities also were important in that. One day I was just talking with Tim, and he said, "Oh, how would you like to write a book?" I've always, and stupidly I said, "Sure, yeah, why not?" But at that moment I had made this commitment, and it opened up these huge doors where information just started pouring in and pouring in. And people often ask, like, how do you know all this stuff, or where does this all come from? I said, it just comes from infinity. It comes from the universe. It's all channeled. And then I have to find the right language for it. And I had a lot of people in spirit working with me saying, no, that's not the right word. We're trying to find uh, the word I use is vibration. That's a weird word to use, but for now, for the sake of argument, that this word will convey this emotion. So it's all about emotional energy. Emotions, I use the word E plus motion, energy and motion, and our feelings always tell us the truth. And so these books are designed to evoke old and new emotional experiences, and to validate emotional experiences, and to convey truth, and only the person reading it. Like, I'm not saying that the books are giving us the truth, but there are a truths that may resonate with certain people. And people who have read these books constantly comment to me and how it seems to be an active living material, that it seems to change in some kind of way. So there's a lot of psychological stuff, which because I'm a psychotherapist as well and a psychologist, that I have a lot of background in that. So you can see there's just all this information being relayed, but then trying to capture it and then put it in simple, readable form was yet another huge challenge, which is why it took so many years. And and when I say it was 24/7, I mean it, because sometimes I would be woken up at 3:30 in the morning, and they would say, someone was finally able to get through with this piece of information for this sentence on page 59. You got to get up and write it down now, or it's going to be lost. And I would have to get it up. And that just went on all the time, no matter where I was. And even when I was doing another job or something, I would have a notepad next to me, and my hand would be writing down some stuff, and then to put this information. So it took years and years and years to find the best language for this in a timely way. And there literally were hundreds of thousands of people So this idea of the risen assembly is overwhelming enough, but the idea of like there's this risen collective above them. And so a lot of the information that came through eventually that I was able to capture, or Tim and I were able to capture to put on the physical page, comes from very far off, so to speak. And there are many people, risen people is the word I'll use for now, who are so far out there that they really couldn't be considered to be human anymore in the way that we are. They don't have really, it's not, doesn't convey a lot of meaning to them. And so, but they wanted to contribute something to this, or they were asked to. And so it was relayed on down what I called a spiritual pony express, kind of like they have mediums, so to speak, on their sides, many, many sides. And so this information was relayed down way, and by the time it would get to me, it would be concentrated because it picks up a lot of stuff along the way. It's almost sort of like that game of telephone that we might have played as kids, where you say something and by the time it gets to you, it's completely distorted. And so there was a lot of concern about that this doesn't get distorted. And that had a lot to do with me and Tim and our ability to perceive these things.
So I find all of this really interesting because I have also found through my own intuitive work that language is really important. And I get corrected often on the language if I go to write something down that I feel like has been given to me. If I don't have the right word, I'll get stuck for a moment and until the correct word comes. So it does seem that language is really significant to those who are communicating with us. And the one lovely thing about the books that you have written is that they are so beautifully written. And
Yeah.
the language does seem to have layers of meaning to it so that every time you go back, you get something new out of it. So I really appreciate that. Do you have anything else to say about sort of the energy around language and, why they've chosen to say, maybe you have an example of something specific where that seemed significant?
It's pointed out at some point in one of the books, maybe both, that words are not the thing, they are symbols. And the thing itself is also a symbol, which is kind of mind blowing. So we're sort of like kind of getting a few steps away from the actual thing. The actual thing is the emotion or the experience, which is so personal and intimate that any emotion, Sally, that you might have is completely unique to the universe. It's never been felt before. It never will be felt again. It's contributing to the growth and the expansion and what the Risen call the grand tapestry of the universe. It's constantly being woven in that way. And words also can be woven, but it's an emotional content. So it uses the example of, say, like if you say the word traffic to someone who lives in, say, the backwoods of Kentucky, it will convey a meaning very different for someone who lives in LA. Same word, multi meanings. And so this was one of the challenges of this kind of material, is finding this language that doesn't try to prove something to someone else or validate something to someone else or serve someone else's agenda. Like the Risen have their own agenda, if that word can be used, but it's done in such a loving, compassionate way. It's inviting us to explore and experiment. And that's why so many of the contributors to this were and are educators, scientists especially. Like there's a lot of science involved in this that's not terrestrial science. So the language is really, really important. Riley Haggerty, who's a spiritualist historian, told me, or even said somewhere, that English is used differently in this book than he's ever come across before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can only imagine the monumental task of taking those, I'm going to use the word concepts, emotions, and fitting them into our limited human language, which often falls very short of what we want to communicate.
And so, great. What does this all mean? Why would I devote 9 years of my life for the first book before it actually found itself in print, and then 6 or 7 more years for the second book? Because it took that long that kind of devotion. And I know like people have asked me like, when are you going to write another book? And you've heard me say like over my dead body. It's just it's very, very labor intensive. One purpose of this material is the first book, The Risen Dialogues. I've always described it as it's advanced mediumship material, that it's not mediumship 101 or astral traveling for dummies. There's plenty of wonderful books about there for beginners and things like that. But this is like, unless you are consciously practicing medium in some kind of way, a lot of this stuff is going to look crazy to you, or just won't make any sense, or you won't even be able to read it in some kind of a way. But the premise of it is that it suggests take what you need and leave the rest. Like you don't have to understand all of this. And you're also contributed to it in your own reading. It becomes this living, but you create a relationship with this material, and the relationship is also with the people, not just me, but all these hundreds of thousands of people in spirit who are constantly contributing to it. And so the premise is that everyone has mediumship capabilities, to put it short. Everyone, a lot of people don't believe they can, or they've got to hunt down some kind of a medium to tell them exactly what they want to hear or to resolve a problem. And what this book is saying, sure, you can do that. However, know that everyone was created so we all have access to this form of communication, and the forms are endless. And it goes into all kinds of odd ways of recognizing that you might actually be having communication with people on the other side, so to speak, but don't know it or don't realize it. And so this is invoking hidden, what I call spiritual senses. We have our physical senses. We also have associative spiritual senses, clairvoyance, clairaudience, hearing, seeing, feeling, sensing, and stuff like that. With most people, they're kind of very latent or sleeping in something. So this book is designed to start stimulating and raising some of those things. And so it's encouraging people in safe ways, and that's another issue as well too, to explore how you probably already have been communicating with the risen in some kind of a way. And then the book itself uses, what I noticed after many years of writing it is that, trying to find a commonality between the material and the reader is no easy thing. But it used grief as the thread throughout because everyone will experience grief on their stay on this planet, and so everyone can kind of understand and resonate with that. So it used grief as a commonality thread. I was very fascinated about this. Like, what's the purpose of grief? Like, what is it, and why is it so awful and so hard? And they said, well, we'll write another book about that. So the other book about grief came out about that grief is a very human emotion, and that it's meant to be transformed in that way. No easy thing to do, because it's very easy to try to avoid it or get stuck in it. And so when we wake up there, when we make our transition, all that will fall away and things will make sense. But they're saying it's possible to make sense of this here and now, to evolve in not supernatural ways, but supra, supranational ways, to rise above it. And so there's a lot of psychology and kind of therapeutic ideas in these books about how to access your own abilities and capabilities and how to grow them into something, whether you want communication with people here or people there, it's up to you.
Well, and I would say that having been on my own grief journey, having a child on the other side, I would have given anything to have had this book sooner than I did. I mean, I'm certainly glad that I eventually came to it, and I'm grateful for you for writing on that. But grief seems to be one of the most life-altering experiences for human beings, and it can crack you open or it can shut you down. And so, what is your hope for people who may be in deep grief when they read the Risen book on grief?
All we really want when we're in grief is to feel better. So that's the premise. If suddenly we can remember the word better, hope is described as, so we're kind of digging a grave for ourselves with our grief. Like it's just we're digging and we're exhausted and tired and hopeless and helpless and all those things. And so Hope is described as a rope that comes down into the hole. It's dropped down into the hole. Like the material constantly asks us to remember to ask for help, which is hard to do when you're feeling helpless because you're focused on the helpless. And so it's about focus. And so sometimes we're in the deepest, darkest moments of our despair, and the rope of hope is dangling right next to us that someone who loves us from the other side or even this side has sent down in, but we can't see it, or we don't even know it exists, or we're not ready for it yet. But the idea is to be able to at least grab onto hope, which feels a little better, and just hang on for dear life, and then let it pull us up out of the hole. But we have to ask for help. Like, the universe is not going to intervene. It is not going to intervene in any kind of way unless we ask for help. And then suddenly we have access to all the power that there possibly can be in the universe. And just asking for help silently. And it also emphasizes the material that often the help arrives immediately, but our awareness of it is very slow. Like, sometimes it's so subtle. It doesn't yell and scream at us like our grief is or our anger is. It's this quiet, still, quiet, whispering voice. Like, I'm here, it's okay, everything is all right, we got your back. But we can't hear that because it arrives quickly, but so subtly and so softly that we often can't detect it or hearing it, because the storms of our grief are just completely so chaotic that we can't. So this is where we need to have some kind of spiritual practice, which in the book is called sacred diligence, every day, in order to get aligned or attuned or centered or grounded, whatever word works for you, where we're in this open, receptive space. And so hope comes down into this like a rope, and we hang onto the rope. It pulls us up out of it, but then we let go of hope, which is very fascinating. It says, let go of the rope. Now you're back on your own 2 feet. Sit down, rest, drink some water, calm down, chill out, all these things that we're probably not doing or haven't been doing. And I know, again, it says like these are just words, and it's just words on the page, and they sound great, but we have to actually actualize it in some way. And that's what spiritual diligence is that we have, every day we have to do something that is nourishing to us spiritually in some kind of a way. So we're already doing all kinds of things that are nourishing in us in other ways.
So let me ask you really quick then. For me, I fell into meditation early on after my son transitioned, and found that that was very quickly the easiest way not only to soothe myself, but to start to be open to the possibility of communication. So, and most mediums, if they're telling people about development, the first thing they say is, meditate. Are there other ways that people can kind of go about this spiritual diligence beyond meditation or in addition to meditation that would be helpful?
And anything that makes you feel better, which means, it doesn't mean anything that makes you feel like a natural high, not an artificial high. Like, yeah, sure, a Bloody Mary will make you feel better, but it's an artificial high, and it's also toxic, or drugs or anything like that. They kind of work in their own way. And sometimes, even with my patients, medication is necessary to get someone to sort of a baseline of calmness. But drugs and alcohol don't teach us anything. They're just interventions. And so you have to also, if you're going to be taking medication of some kind, which might be necessary, you also have to engage in some sort of a acquisition of education or learning. You have to grow. You want to grow from it in some kind of a way. And so any activity, just like creating music or painting or gardening or feeding your family or whatever brings you joy. Because when we're in that deep grief, it seems like all the joy has gone out of our life. And people have, for the most part, a distorted version of what joy is. They think they should get joy out of something. And you sort of can, but eventually you deplete it. You suck the energy out of things or people. And joy, actually, the word enjoy means to put joy into things. And so we're putting joy into life, and we can put joy into anything we want. And joy comes through us. That's that aligning or meditation. Somehow suddenly now you're an open channel to all the energy that is, and it comes through us and it goes out into the world, and suddenly everything looks different, feels different, because it's like this fountain coming through us, this uprushing, which is life and more life. And the risen constantly remind us that there's nothing but life, and there's no such thing as death. Death is not a real word. It's not useful in any kind of a way, that you can just forget it. That forgetting is part of the sacred diligence, is that you focus on life rather than on death. Hard to do when you just seemingly lost the love of your life in some kind of a way, because whether we realize it or not, we're most likely focusing on their absence rather than their presence.
Right.
And the focusing on absence feels one way, and the focus on presence feels the other way. So you sort of have to go back and forth and decide which feels better. And I didn't realize that until one day Tim said two things to me. He said, "You're trying too hard. It's as if you and I are trying to take a nice walk in this lovely garden, and you've got me in a headlock. And just let me go and let me stand up, and I'm okay. I'm fine. I can walk. You don't have to worry about me. Let me enjoy the sights and my awareness of you." And the other thing he said was that, stop looking for me back there in the past of memories. Like, you're going through all these memories, and you're mourning these memories and grieving, and they're making you feel, he said, "I'm not there anymore. Turn around." Like he's tapping me on the shoulder. "I'm right here behind you. Turn around and look at me where I'm at now." So then we can join arms and then move forward in a joyful way. And so that's part of spiritual diligence as well too, is it's, and diligence means, like, it takes perseverance, because our world, such as it is so full of things that distract us and confuse us and frighten us, as well as delight us in all kinds of ways. And so there are many worlds interacting, and the risen material talks about these many worlds interacting, and how there were many worlds that contributed to this book, and people from different, it calls it time dimensions, perhaps. I'm not sure what the right language is. So yeah, Sally, it's like, even though it seems like very simple to just tell someone, well, start meditating, it's not. And then there are so many forms of meditation that you don't know where to start, or who to listen to, or what to read. And the advice I was always given was, just pick something and stick with it. And as you change, it will change. And either it will stop working for you, which always happens, and then, because you've grown beyond it, and then, but it will also change your understanding and your ability to perceive things, and things will be brought to you. And now your spiritual senses are getting awakened, and now your life has just gotten bigger instead of smaller. So you just start with something, anything. It doesn't matter how silly or insignificant it might seem, because it's private. It's just between you and nobody else. But again, also to remember to ask for help if you want it, because there's a lot of help waiting for us.
And part of this goes back to a theme we were discussing on Monday night on a group we were on. And several people were saying, well, I've tried and tried and tried, and I can't seem to communicate with my loved ones. And I brought up the point of, you're trying really hard. Allow, you need to maybe just let go and allow it to take place. Could you speak to that at all?
Well, that's a theory, right? It looks and sounds great on paper, and to hear, but still, what's the resistance? So we're saying, it's like static on the line in a way, like just like you're trying to talk with someone, and you're talking over them, or your mind is just going, and most people have no control over their thinking. Very few people have control over their thinking. And to reduce the static means to reduce the resistance. And the resistance is just fear. It's worry, mostly. It's just worry. I love that phrase about that worry is praying for the wrong things. Right? We're kind of using this energy, but we're using it in such a way that, and we can't worry enough to make worry go away. We can't be anxious enough to make anxiety go away, but we tend to act as if we believe that that's true. So there's a lot of belief systems that get challenged in this kind of endeavor. From my experience as a therapist, what I've noticed about belief systems is that most of them have been constructed to avoid tampering. And so when you start trying to fiddle with your beliefs or change them, there's all these little safety things and backdoors and stuff to try to scare you, like, don't change that belief. And you can see how strong beliefs are, because people will kill each other or go to war rather than change beliefs. It's insane, right? It's insanity. So we're looking for sanity in that kind of a way. So that if you even want to boil it down more, I always ask people, what's the fear?
Yeah.
Not what's your fear, what are you afraid of? I want to depersonalize it. And so don't take it on and say, this is my fear. It's like, no, you don't want to take it on. Put the fear over there. We're going to stand on this line. The fear is over there. Let's look at it and say, oh, and then we see sometimes the more we look at it, it kind of just fades away. Like it's not a real thing. It's sort of an illusion in some kind of a way, but we can invest it with all the emotional energy that makes it feel real for us, or we can invest our energy in better ways. And again, it's back to that. We're using language. The way these books use language is often refreshingly different or surprisingly different for many people. And it doesn't try to dissuade you in any way. It's just offering, these are examples or these are ideas. So again, it's a lot of exploration, a lot of experimentation in that kind of way. It's very scientific in that way.
Well, and you're hitting on a really important word to me, and I think Gary as well, because of the name of our podcast, Soul Explorers. But a big piece of my personal healing was based in becoming exploratory and being curious about potentials and what can be experienced and you know, what relationship do I still have with my loved ones who have left this physical world? And as I allowed my curiosity to lead me, I became much, much, much more joyful, less in grief, and more confident in that ongoing relationship, which is why I love your books, because they very much help people to sort of fall into that curiosity around what's possible.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because in the book on grief, it includes and expands upon a lot of material from the original book because it presents it in a new way. So there's sort of an introduction. I don't know if it's called introduction, but it's something that's like a sort of like it's an introduction to the book on grief. And at the end, it says, if you feel you understand everything that you just read, you don't have to read any further. It's all encapsulated in this. But it said, because we know you want more and you want to hear more, the Risen have provided us with lots more to explore and beyond this. And one of the main few premises that it puts forward is this idea is to remain curious, unbiased, and unafraid. Those three qualities, if you can keep those three qualities going, you're going to be, everything is going to just unfold perfectly no matter what. It just does. And it's a curiosity that, maybe in our grief, we throw ourselves down on the ground and we can't get up. We're too tired. We won't get up at some point. But at some point, we're going to have to get up. We're going to have to go to the bathroom. We're going to have to do in some sort of a way. Like eventually our curiosity, we reconnect with the energy of the universe, which is always unfolding and moving forward. It's expanding, and science has confirmed, they confirmed that the universe is expanding. And so because we're part of it, we have to expand too. And if we resist it, then we feel what that resistance feels like. That doesn't feel good. We feel stuck in some kind of way. And so getting unstuck through grief, it likens, for me, the illustration was used of a seesaw or a teeter-totter, which I'm not sure if everyone knows what that is. I talked to someone recently from a Middle East or from Ukraine who didn't know what that was. But it's a seesaw, where two kids get on and you're sort of going up and down, up and down, up and down. And it's on the playground of life, right? We just want to play. That's all we want to do is play and have fun. That's all we're here. We're not here to work. The Risen assures there is no school. There will be no test. If you want tests, probably you'll have to find someone to make one for you, but that's okay. Nobody really cares. But the idea is just to have fun. And curiosity is on one end of the teeter-totter, and then fearlessness is on the other end. Fear is very heavy, right? It weighs us down. And so to release the weight, the burden of fear immediately allows the teeter-totter to start moving. And what is important for that part is so curious, unbiased, and unafraid. Unbiased means no judgment. Don't make any judgments at all in any kind of a way for now. You can later, but just for 5 minutes, just kind of have this judgment-free place. And so every little kid who's played on a teeter-totter, if you've been on the playground and you can't find anyone to play with you, little kids will still get on the teeter-totter, like they're trying to figure out how to make it work and go up and down. And it's sort of like, but then it gets boring very quick and it doesn't work. And then they go to the other side and then they try to running back and forth, and see if they can sort of do something weird with it. And that's their curiosity. Then they find out that then when they move to the center of the teeter-totter, something amazing happens, like they're balancing, they're experiencing a new law. Rather than this law of opposites, they're experiencing this law of equality. And suddenly now you have a 360-degree view of the playground as well too. And it's very restful and it's very peaceful. And there's no judgment about it in any kind of way. It's just kind of a feeling of relief. So we're looking for relief, we're looking for feeling better. So anything that can get us to the center of the seesaw, usually it's rest for people in some kind of a way, then that's where we start. It's always coming back to rest, coming back to rest. There was a quantum physicist who's Indian, and of course, it's one of those beautiful names I can never remember. He's quite funny, and a lot of I've worked with. Interestingly enough, I had to acquaint myself with all kinds of material, and so I have a library now of probably 15,000 books that the Risen have brought me over the years about science and quantum physics and all kinds of stuff for me, just to acquaint my mind with this, so that when they gave me the word, then somehow my mind would be able to put it into English. And so it's very intricate in that way. This Indian quantum physicist discovered God. I've seen a lot of quantum physicists over the years slowly get up and stand up and said, we just have to say, like, we've gone in so deep and so far now that the only answer is God. Like they're declaring that they're no longer atheistic in some kind of a way. And he said sort of like there's this wave of life going through us and through the universe. And sometimes it's going up like activity and then it goes down and it's rest. And it's up in activity and it's up and it's rest. And it's like a seesaw kind of a thing, or it's playing on a swing, whatever, or swimming in some kind of a way, or just breathing even is doing that. And so he said going up is like the doing, and then going down, resting is the being. And so we can't be doing all the time, and we can't be being all the time. That life on this planet, the balance is doing and being, going up on the seesaw in some kind of a way. And he liked Frank Sinatra a lot, so he would always say it's like doobie doobie doo, and as a way to remind himself of that. And as you can see, also bringing humor into the formula, taking fear out of the formula and replacing it with humor makes a huge, huge difference. It seems to me the universe is based upon a sense of humor.
Yeah, and it even has a quality to it that can be healing. I can't remember who it was, some woman that I watched a video of, so I apologize that I can't give a name, but she had been diagnosed with cancer, and she decided that she was going to sit at home and watch sitcoms and laugh all day. And her cancer went into spontaneous remission. So there's something to that. I know that's anecdotal, but I think you're right with humor. It does shift things dramatically. We know in physical circles that often the primary guides will come through initially just to get everybody laughing and happy.
It's been documented through, going way back to physical mediumship sittings, where there was always one of the spirits that was kind of their job to be the clown and to cheer people up and to make fun of them and tease everyone in some kind of a way. That was kind of a standard thing, and hopefully still is.
Well, I find in my own communication with the Risen that they have an extremely good sense of humor, and that always lifts me up. The fact that they'll interject humor, they'll laugh at me or with me, it brings me up a level. There's a stepping up when that transpires. So
that seems to be one of the main things that attracted the Risen to Tim and me. So here I am, a kind of an embodied person on Earth, And Tim is where Tim is, like since he had transitioned in the late 90s, the mid 90s. And it was our sense of humor with one another that when we were constantly laughing, and we would rather laugh than sleep. We would just stay up all night coming up with ideas for new board games for kids, and coming up with the weirdest, stupidest names. We would just make ourselves laugh like little kids constantly, or we would tell each other jokes. It was just constantly laughing in that way. And it seems to be that that was one of the main things, among others, that attracted the scientists to our experience, what was going on. And then as scientists did, they said, this is a very interesting opportunity to explore and experiment and see. And so the first book, The Risen Dialogues, is called Dialogues because Tim is also contributing to the book. He's writing it, and I'm writing what he's saying to me. And so there's this dialogue, and you can see this dialogue between Tim and I as we move through the book and discovering things. And he's offering ponderings, and I'm offering ponderings, and so we're exploring. And sometimes we get a little too, when I get a little too serious, he says something that gets me back on the teeter-totter again. So there's a living quality to this book that just promotes you wanting more. So it's also, the material is meant to stimulate you in some kind of a way to look for more.
I love in your books the reminder, you may not understand this at this moment. And I think they're well placed, because there may be an issue that comes up that you're grappling with, and you feel like you can't go forward in the book until you understand it. Well, yes, you can. You can read on, and that may open up what you weren't understanding before.
Right. And that was something too that, it these books, people describe them as dense. Good word for it. Like the further in you go, the bigger it gets. And there were points when like a lot of this was, I was pretty much in, I don't like using the word trance except in certain instances. Again, that's a word as well too. The word non-ordinary state
Mhm.
is more open for me. And so I was often in non-ordinary state in the way that most children are, and kind of they're sort of trancey. I've never left that for some kind of a reason, and that's because my grandmothers were mediums, and there was a whole back history to my upbringing, that when I would sort of come to and read what was just transmitted, even though I was conscious, I couldn't, it didn't come from me. Like I had to read this as well too. And then Tim is looking at the words and moving the words. And I said, like, this is just too overwhelming or too much. And so they said, well, then slow down. Like, you don't have to jump to the next paragraph just to be able to say you finished a chapter or something. Like, there's something about this paragraph that is drawing you in and wants you to spend time with it. So we came up with this graphic, and the words below it says, the words may not make conscious sense at this time, but my spiritual senses comprehend and retain the knowledge for authentic self. And it says, breathe in and breathe out. Because I also noticed when I was kind of holding my breath, and they said, no, stop, breathe, take a deep breath, go back and reread it. And don't worry if you don't consciously get what you just read. You felt something, and that's the important thing, because feelings always tell us the truth, always. Our minds lie to us all the time, but our feelings are always telling us the truth. So know that even if consciously you didn't understand this, that your spiritual senses are comprehending this. And this is also to get you acquainted with your spiritual senses and to start activating them and enlivening them. And then when you come back, it will read differently. And indeed, people just have written me so many times, you're saying, are you, they would write me and say, you don't address this particular thing in the book, and this is what's coming, this is very unique. And I said, well, go to page 65, second paragraph. And they go and they said, but that wasn't there before. I'm pretty sure that wasn't there before. And I have the same experience as well too. It's just our ability to comprehend and see and understand. We can only take in so much once. So it's always encouraging us to take a breath and just breathe through it. So originally, there were several major publishers who were interested in these books. people that I had formed relationships with. Tim and I had when we both worked for publishers back in the 80s. And there were some major publishers who were interested, but the reason said, no, absolutely not, because they will slash and burn it. They will pull it apart. They will have their own marketing agendas. They will argue with you about language. We need to have complete control over that. And so I had to create my own publishing company because I had worked as a computer graphic artist and word processor when it was just being developed. That's what I did for clients here. I created books. And so I knew how to create my own book and do all the imagery and stuff. So I literally did all of this. Tim and I did all of it from beginning to end. I'm not sure where I was going with that, but
I think there's no coincidences about the skill sets that we develop and how they ultimately get utilized, it seems.
thank you. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Also, because so the word orchestration is used an awful lot. And if you've ever been to an orchestra or if you've been in an orchestra, also because I'm one of those overeducated people, so to speak. Like I have degrees up the wazoo, and my curiosity has led me to learn all these new things. And I was trained as a classical musician as a child, and I have all these art degrees and just all and science and biology and all this stuff that contributes to that. But orchestration is my favorite word about how if you're in an orchestra, if there's one, everything is orchestrated. Like all these instruments are chosen exactly to create this immense harmony, and the universe is built upon harmony. And if something goes out of harmony, which it does, the universe will bring it back into harmony if we don't resist it, if we kind of don't be afraid and just let it resolve. And so these books were orchestrated. You can see as you're reading it, just all this stuff brought together, and then it's also intricately machined almost together, or in some kind of a way, or fabricated or put together. I don't know, those aren't very good words. And one thing that the Risen suggests is to know that sometimes you will come upon material in the book that doesn't make sense. And you'll hear yourself say, well, that doesn't make sense. That kind of contradicts what was just said a few pages back, or it sort of doesn't seem rational, or it sort of just doesn't quite complete itself in thought. And they're saying this was done intentionally. It's like these dangling participles. If you know about grammar and stuff, it's sort of like dangling, and it's like these little threads to get your attention and to grab on this thread and to invite you to start following the breadcrumbs into the forest. And so it's sort of to lead you off the path. Everyone thinks we've got to be on some kind of a path. This is to get you off the path and go exploring with your own mind, saying, well, that doesn't make sense. Let me think about that more. And they never complete it. They leave it for you to complete because it's your unique experience, and it's what you will contribute to your own spiritual growth and the growth of the universe.
That's beautiful. Well said. August, where do you recommend people go to find these books? I know Amazon carries them, but I think you have other avenues as well.
Well, there's the website, therisenbooks.com. You can either go, there's a lot of podcasts that I've done over the years back with some pretty interesting people, but there's a place where you can click on the link and it will take you to the company that publishes or actually prints my books. And so they're print on demand. You can buy them on Amazon and everything like that, but I would just go to the website, which takes you to the printer itself, and then the printer will print you a brand new fresh copy, which may take anywhere from 7 to 10 days of any of those books.
And there's something magical about these books and having them in physical form.
Exactly. And again, the orchestration, they were built by hand on purpose, intentionally. Every single punctuation is placed. It could have taken years to make that comma appear where it appeared in that period. And they insisted that the page has to end here. Everything was orchestrated and constructed, including the art that's in it. Everything. I have like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of folders and files on my computers to kind of make sense of all this thing. So having the printed book, it was meant to be a printed book because there's something about the physicality of the book that is part of the experience of reading it.
I agree.
in the early days when Kindle was just first coming out, some people said, "Oh, I want things for my Kindle." They were reporting to me that their Kindle was having problems. Whenever they tried to open the book on the Kindle would shut down, or it would delete the book in some kind of a way. That doesn't seem to be happening anymore, unfortunately. So,
I have the Kindle versions, but
yeah, me
that's
too.
only because I'm running out of bookshelf space.
Yeah, and I have it on my iPad. I read the Book of Grief a lot, almost every day. That there's something in it that helps me.
I love that you go back and read them yourself.
Yeah.
That tells me a lot about the content that's there and how it is collaborative.
Well, it also states very clearly in the beginning of the book on grief that I state very clearly, a few places where my voice is heard. I said, this book was also written for me, this book on grief, because at that time I said, I know there are some grief experiences coming my way that I'm not sure I'm going to be able to withstand or handle. Like, I'm pretty scared about these grief experiences I know are coming my way. And so this book is written for me as well too. And it also emphasizes that I'm not an expert on grief in any kind of way, nor should I be presented as one. And so this book is for me as well too. And indeed, during one part of the book, I experienced 8 transitions of people, like within 8 months, friends of mine. And then one of my parents also began their transition in the mid book. And so it says, which is a major marker for us to have a parent transition. And so by the end of this book, my parent will have fully transitioned in that kind of a way. And so this book is also helping me along in that journey. And it didn't stop, it continues to help me in my relationships with my parents and other people as well.
A lifetime endeavor exploring these books. I highly recommend them. And I really want to thank you, August, for joining us today. It's been a really enlightening conversation. August, you also lead a group which Sally and I participate in called the Risen Exploratorium. And it's a discussion chapter by chapter twice a month.
Right, right. Well, it was kind of a thing that I wanted to have going back from the beginning. And I sort of envisioned because I would sit down with just friends or people, we just sort of are talking about the book. And just in talking about it, stuff's just started coming out. An hour later, we're all sort of like shaking our heads, like, what was that? And how did that come out? And like, somehow it opens channels and more information starts coming through, not me, but through other people in some kind of a way. And again, this is also the development of our spiritual senses. Like, it's stimulating and waking things up, and you're having these enlightening moments or whatever you want to call them. And so in the early days, I called it fireside chats. I kind of envisioned, I think they used to, that president that had fireside chats where it just, I'm not here to be an authority or dictate stuff to you. It's just like we're kind of sitting in our rocking chairs by the fire talking about this carefully. So that's what this exploratorium is about. I'm just so thankful that you guys are able to provide time and space for it.
Oh, yeah. I think what we'll do is put in the notes the link, and it's twice a month, the first and third Thursday generally of the month at 3 p.m. Eastern time. And we'll put that information, and that way people can join if they're curious and want to explore more. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was a very enlightening discussion, and let's have you back again because there's so much more we could talk about.
There's a lot more, right? A little goes a
Yeah.
long way. So I'd be happy
Yeah.
to.
Great.
Oh, thank you, August. You are a wellspring of wisdom and just a really good friend. So I'm so glad that we got to spend this time with you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.